Hello, I'm Robert, and this is about Montaigne, who's a false prophet, and his ideas are scaring people. And like all of these false prophets, he's claiming to see the future, and he can't. Not only that, his ideas don't even make any sense at all. So, because he doesn't understand geology. So he says that pole shifts are global catastrophes in which the surface of the Earth, the entire outer crust of the planet, suddenly moves in one solid piece over the layers of liquid rock below, like the chocolate around a cherry. It's a very vivid image, but it just happens to be completely false. So the liquid rock doesn't even come anywhere close to the surface. So let's have a look, and this is how they know. The two main kinds of earthquakes. One is the P wave, and we can show it with a slinky. So this is a P wave. See how that little thing went like that? You give a little push of a quick push of the slinky, and a little ripple goes all the way through, and that's the P wave, or pressure wave. And then the other one.
Watch it one more time. Just look at the rings of the slinky. What happens to the rings of the slinky as I have the earthquake? And you're about to raise your hand. Bingo. They get close together. Everybody see that?
So the P wave can go through liquid. But now we look at the S wave.
Watch how the rings get closer together.
Oh, he's doing.
So they bunch, and then that bunch of coils just kind of moves. That bunching kind of moves all the way down. And if it hits something else, it bounces backward. Now S waves are a little different. They move in a side-to-side motion. So to model how an S wave travels with the slinky, what I'm actually going to do is just take the earthquake, and it's going to model a side-to-side motion. Now watch how the slinky moves. And here it is.
So that's the S wave. That does not go through liquid. Remember, you're going through it, not on the surface, but going right through it. That doesn't go through liquid. So when they look at when you have an earthquake there on the Earth, this is the entire Earth, an earthquake there, then the S waves, and you can distinguish between them with a seismometer. So if you have seismometers all the way around there, they will detect the S waves, but all the ones around here on the Earth, they won't detect anything. And then by looking at how it works, this means the liquid core has to be here, which is well away from the surface. Then if you look at the P waves, then some of them go like that, and some of them go through the center, and they get it's like the change of speed as they go through the center has a kind of lensing effect, rather like using a lens with light, and from that you then detect them there, and you have a shadow zone for them as well. And so the combination of those two effects mean that we can tell the shape of the interior of the Earth very well indeed, where the liquid is. And so this is how it works. You've got the continents. This isn't to scale. The continents are kind of quite very thin. You've got the ocean. Then down here you've got various hard layers, and then you've got the 5 is the outer liquid. So we look at 5. That's the liquid. So we have that distance of nearly 3,000 kilometers deep, and that is all solid rock. So you've probably heard of the continents moving. They move very, very, very slowly. A few centimeters a year for the width of the Atlantic. I mean, vast, very, very slight movement. So, and that is actually movement of soft, hot, solid rock. And it's much like the way that asphalt can move very slowly on a road in hot weather. And they actually do experiments where we have a pitch gradually falling in a drop, solid pitch falling. A drop will take a decade maybe to fall, and it's that very, very slow motion of solid, warm, soft, solid rock is what moves the continents around. And the idea that the continents were on a thin crust floating above liquid, that goes back to the early 20th century, and that goes back to a chap called Hapgood, and we now know for absolute certainty that is not like that because of these earthquakes. These earthquakes it absolutely shows that it has to be solid down to there, or else we wouldn't be able to detect S waves If it was liquid, then we'd only detect S waves in a little region about the earthquake. We wouldn't be able to detect them anywhere else. There are other kind of earthquakes that go up and down along the surface of the Earth, but S waves, they're the ones that sort of go through with this side-by-side motion. So, the two main ones are these two. There's some other ones as well. So that's just absolute, and there you are. I've got that picture, and it shows the S wave and S wave shadow zone. Say that's stiff rock, and there's liquid core. And this is another cutaway showing how it works. The stiffer mantle, rigid mantle, and the stiffer mantle, which can flow but very, very slowly, and then the crust, continental crust, and then the outer liquid core and the inner core, which is solid. So this means that his idea is total nonsense. His idea is silly if you have as silly if you have a scientific background as saying that Usain Bolt is a high jumper and jumped over the moon. It just doesn't make sense. And it's never slipped. The Earth has never slipped. It's a bit like going out and standing on the road outside your house and just waiting for the road to move. It's never going to happen. You want to go into the village or the shops or something. You just stand on the road and wait for it to move. And he's saying that in one day the entire Earth's crust is going to move nearly as fast as a jet plane, so that the North Pole will swap. North Pole will swap with the South Pole. That's what he's saying. And you'd be sitting in the United Kingdom where I am, and then on this particular day, then suddenly everything would start moving very fast. Everyone would of course fall over at that speed, and then when you manage to get up and if you manage to survive all the toppling houses, then you'd see that the Southern Cross was above you instead of the Pole Star. I mean, it's such utter nonsense. This is not going to happen. The fastest moving continents are things like Australia is moving 7 centimeters a year, and this is a bit of a problem with GPS. So you have very, very, very slow motion that you can detect nowadays, and you can actually detect this motion with GPS. There's absolutely no doubt about it. You've got your GPS receiver, and you will see that in a year it's moved 7 centimeters, and so. The continents are slowly moving, they're not slip sliding like they used to believe as one possibility in the early 20th century. So now this is often confused with the magnetic pole shift. So these woo-woo, silly false prophets and things, they don't seem to know the difference between a magnetic pole shift and a geological pole shift. So the magnetic pole shift is rather different. This is due to electrical currents, and I can't remember where the electrical currents are, but the electrical currents, it's a small little shifts get this kind of amplifying effect. I better bring up. I could talk about that in a separate article, but it's due to small electrical currents which kind of amplify magnetic fields and the motions of the currents. Oh yes, motions of currents in the liquid core, I think, just little helical tornado type vortices which then enhance whatever small variations in the magnetic field and electric field, then that creates how big magnetic field. It's quite complicated, and they're still working out the details. But so the magnetic field is due to motions in the core, and then sometimes these will motions of electricity, and then that can change very easily and over a period of time. Then I dare say I've made some mistakes in that presentation, but I mean that's because I didn't check it before. But this is it's a movement of electrons, electricity, and that can change much more easily. And it is right in the centre of the Earth that it's happening. And if you look at the virtual, this is the last magnetic pole shift we had. And it was just a temporary one, extremely brief one. And that'll be in the longer version. I'll probably go into more detail about that. I haven't got many details there, but you can see it's getting on for 40,000 years ago, and each of these dots is 20 years. So you can see they spent a lot of time up around the poles, Then it had some very fast motion and came down to the South Pole and hovered around there. And this was a brief excursion, so it just swapped briefly, then it swapped back again. You can tell, there were no extinctions back then, it wasn't a mass extinction, but if we were happening to be headed for a magnetic pole shift, then not very much actually happens during it. You get, but it would happen very slowly to start with. You'd have decades, centuries, and it sticks around in some places for a century or so on the way. And halfway through, so you start having your compasses pointing left and east and west, and rather north and south for people in northern latitudes, long before it's heading off for the southern hemisphere. And so and at the moment both of them up near the poles. This is just a little bit off Antarctica, and this is up, and that's up somewhere there. I think it's more towards America in there, and it's moving year by year, but very, very slowly compared with the size of the Earth. And the magnetic field is still very strong, and there's no sign of a magnetic pole shift, a magnetic pole shift at present. But it wouldn't happen in a single day. It would happen over centuries. And during that period of centuries, and this is a very fast one, it's more likely over thousands of years. And during that time when the magnetic field is rather weak, then you get more ionizing radiation, and the main effect on humans would be this would reduce the amount of ozone in the atmosphere, in the upper atmosphere. This increased amounts of UV, and you need to watch out a bit more carefully about going out on sunny days and skin cancer, and about glasses to protect you from cataracts. So maybe in our distant future, probably a few thousand years from now, it could be centuries from now if it's very fast, and it could be for tens of thousands of years if we're not headed for one, then we might need our generations, great-grandchildren might have to take a bit more care about skin cancer on sunny days, and about cataracts. That's all and they would have to make sure that their satellites are properly shielded from them, which of course they would, and we're given centuries to do that. We have plenty of satellites that orbit way outside the protection of the Earth's magnetic field, so there's no problem doing that. So magnetic field is no big deal, and we're not actually headed for one. And so another thing he does, that he talks about, he prophesied a disaster on December 28th for 2010, GG37. He's just going, he of course doesn't know anything about asteroids, and this has been removed from the risk list, and it never even reached a warning level. NASA never warned anyone about it because it was expected to miss, and we would surely have seen it by now. And they finally did spot it, and they found eventually that it's orbiting, it's just an ordinary mainstream asteroid, main belt asteroid. This is Mars, this is Earth, this is Jupiter, and most asteroids orbit harmlessly between Mars and Jupiter, and this one is doing exactly that. It's just orbiting like that. But they only had a day or so of observations, and so when they spotted it, because it's a very small one, very distant, when they spotted it back in 2010, they didn't have enough observations to show that it was a main belt asteroid, and there was a very small possibility that it was going to come in like that. But it never did. It soon became clear that as soon as they got more observations this year, they proved it's a main belt asteroid. And then his other reason, he says that, well, first of all, he prophesied that the world would end in 2002. And he's had other ones, but this one is still up there as a book. And that seems remarkably, that seems very silly. Who's going to buy a book that says the world is going to end in 2002? It's still for sale on Amazon. You can go and buy it. If you want to try and find out why the world is going to end in 2002, David Montaigne is your name, is your man. He's very silly. And then he also talks about Nostradamus, and he claims prophecies from Nostradamus. Most Nostradamus' prophecies, many of them are just made up. Others are strange reinterpretations of enigmatic things he said. There's no reason to treat him as a prophet for our time. He only made one. In fact, the very idea of a prophet is not scientific. There's no. I mean, you could have had a world in which humans can see the future in different laws of physics or something, some way they can see the future, but that doesn't seem to be our case here, because there's people just don't use. There's no evidence. You don't have a. Trump doesn't have a state prophet. Boris Johnson doesn't have a state prophet. You don't get people using prophets to predict the lottery. You don't get people saying, "Oh, I won the lottery. How did you win it?" They say, "Oh, well, I consulted the village prophet, and he said that this is what it would be." I mean, we just don't have this sort of thing. There are different. Of course, people have religious ideas about prophets in the past, and some people think it's just history, and some people have other ideas. You can go and look them up, and then there are, of course, ideas that there were prophets in the past, and that God can help people to prophesy, and God can see the future. But there's loads of people who claim to be prophets from God, and they just say things that don't happen. So it seems that, certainly in present-day times, we shouldn't rely on claims of people who say that God's telling them things either, because there are just so many false prophets. If anyone ever does accurately say anything about the future, then how is anybody going to know if there are many different ones say false things? So just don't listen to people who say that they're prophets, because this is not a reliable way of knowing about the future either. So. Anyway, so Nostradamus, he said that the major war would start in July 1999, and he said, and experts looking at this prophecy, then he said, they say that the best interpretation would be that a pope, by talking to a leader with Mongol or Lombard connections, would accidentally restart a major war in July 1999. And I mean, that's obviously so far off the mark. So there's no reason to pay any attention to Nostradamus. If you hear about Baba Vanga, then she never made any prophecies. All those are just, she didn't even write anything down, and the people who listened to her, then this was a blind woman, Hungarian, I think, and the people who knew her say that she never said any of the things that they claim she said. So that's just made up. And then all this about conjunctions. Conjunctions don't do anything. They're just a photo op. Sometimes the planets are closer to each other in the sky, but they're not literally close to each other. It's just like if you point your finger at the moon. How does that work? Then your finger, like say if I point my finger at that, suppose that was the moon. Then my eyes don't suddenly feel a gravitational tug because I pointed at the lampshade, and if you point at the moon, you don't get a sudden tug on you from the moon because your finger is between you and the moon. And it's the same with the planets, that if one planet is in front of another planet, then it doesn't make any difference to the gravitational tug, and it doesn't do anything to you. It's just a kind of photo op. And the distant stars are vast distance away, so there's we have lots and lots of conjunctions. There isn't even a conjunction in December, except a very not very close conjunction of Saturn and Venus on the 11th, which is nowhere near his date anyway. And they're just photo ops. So this chap, he's just making stuff up. I think well, I talked about this before in my other talk about this other chap with this crazy prophecies. It's hard to know why they're doing these things. Some people may be doing it because they want to feel famous or something. Maybe because they like all the attention. Some are doing it just for money, for the clicks and the views, and they get lots of ads on YouTube. And some maybe do slightly believe it. And some maybe they think they can see the future, and they're convinced that they know more than geologists, and they just don't know anything about geology, and they just make stuff up, and they think that if they make stuff up that means it's true, and so they'd be somewhat delusional, and some are just bullshitting, which means that they don't actually care whether what they say actually means anything. All they care is about saying something that's impressive to people, and they will just say anything that will have the right effect. And if they're a bullshitter, they're not focusing on the meaning at all. They're just focusing on producing words that impress people. And once they find that a particular form of words is impressive, then they keep repeating that because they've discovered it works. So those are some of the main reasons why people say this thing. You can't actually say for anyone particular unless they explain. And he, of course, comes across very sincere, and he says sincerely this and that. And again, with sincerity, it could be because they're delusional and they believe this stuff, or it could be that they are acting, because some people are capable of acting sincerity very, very convincingly. And I don't think there's any way we can know what's going on there. But whatever the reason, so I say that because people keep asking me, why do these people do these things? Why do they say this stuff if they're not really a false prophet? And the delusional bit. These people. It obviously is a delusion because they say things that are not true. So that's kind of the definition of delusion, that you come to believe things that is not in accord with reality. If he actually literally does believe this stuff, it's really no different for a scientist than someone who goes around saying, this room is full of spiders that are crawling all over the wall, and you look and there are no spiders, and he says, oh yes there are, the giant spiders, I can see them clearly. Then they're in a delusional, according to our consensus reality at least, they're in a different reality that doesn't match what's happening here. And if someone is in a different reality like that, where they're seeing things that we don't see, and they've constructed their own reality, then their prediction of the future are also going to be delusional. So from our point of view, and obviously his predictions don't happen for him anyway, because he's lived through 2002 and nothing happened. So he's become convinced he's a prophet, even though nothing happened when he made this prophecy. Anyway, whatever the reason, then that's his problem really. That's not our problem. Whatever his reason for saying this stuff. And the main thing is that it's not going to happen, it's just nonsense. It doesn't even make sense.